Recorded live.
Hello, and welcome to the Castle Dracula podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we continue our sexy vampire retrospective with the launch, with the second of Hammer Horror's famous Karnstein trilogy, also known as the Carmilla cycle. Tonight's movie is called, alternately, To Love a Vampire, Lust for a Vampire, and even Love for a Vampire, and it came out in January 1971 and stars Michael Johnson, Susanna Lee, and Newt Stensgaard as Carmilla. Bear in mind that if you haven't seen today's movies, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the new Alex Van Helsing adventure, Triumph of Death, in hardback and ebook from HarperCollins. Look at it Amazon, or your local store. With me are Drew Edwards, creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at HalloweenMan.com. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello, and Tony Salvaggio, creator of the new manga Psycom Book 3, which is out from Right Stuff and Tokyopop. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
And with color commentary from, as always, attorney Julia Guzman. Say hello, Julia.
Greetings and salutations.
Greetings. I know that you can't wait to talk about Lust for a Vampire. Okay, Lust for a Vampire, per Wikipedia, which sums it up nicely. In 1830, at a finishing school in Styria, young Mircalla arrives as a new student. A visiting author, Richard Lestrange, instantly falls in love with her, but Mircalla is a vampire. Carmilla Karnstein, who has been resurrected by her vampiric family as students in the school, inhabitants of the nearby village, and those who suspect Mircalla start to die, suspicion turns toward the Karnsteins and their ominous castle. And I won't even get into any more of the plot because we'll go through it. So, okay, guys, we have now returned to Hammer. We are deep in what's called the Elstree Studios days of Hammer because unlike those early, like Horror of Dracula and Curse of Frankenstein that were shot at Bray Studios and Oakley Court, and you can go there and look at what became those practical sets, these movies, these later Hammers from the late 60s, early 70s, are done at Elstree Studios, which are bigger sets, but often kind of strangely more stagey sets. So
and I apologize because I thought the last movie you had a scene from Oakley Court, but I was wrong. So it just looked like that.
I know that you were thinking about that place, the little awning where they, the
it was like a carport type of thing. Yeah.
Yes. And that actually, there is one like that at Oakley Court that they used over and over and over again. But nope, this one, that was actually a real castle. And all of this is on the sets of Bray Studios, and we're not at Elstree Studios. And when they're not at Elstree, then you're seeing them out like on a golf course. And they have this tendency to step like off the golf course and onto the set and back and forth. So first impressions, let's go guy, girl, guy, Drew, then Julia, and then Tony, and then me. Drew, first impressions, Lust for a Vampire.
Well, I don't like this movie as much as the Vampire Lovers. I will come out right and say that it's got a slightly lower rent feel. It's the so-called hero is actually kind of comes off as a bit of a creepy perv for most of the movie. Having said that, I do find it very enjoyable and it's sort of like so bad it's good. There's so many silly things in this movie that I can't help but get a big old grin on my face while watching it. Like, as I was saying prior to the start of recording, this is our first appearance of one of the stalwart of latter Hammer films, Ralph Bates, who is extremely entertainingly hammy in this movie in a role originally intended for Peter Cushing, oddly enough, which makes sense when you see how he sort of is dressed up here, because it seems like it was written for an older man. But I don't know. I do like the movie. It's kind of a condescending type of enjoyment. It's not the full enjoyment I think I have for like the earlier Hammers, and
like
you
the
know,
horror
some
of
of
Dracula.
yeah, Horror of Dracula, Brides of Dracula, Curse of the Werewolf. Really, their high point of their films. Like this is more of I enjoy it and sort of like, hey, here's this weird early '70s vampire movie with a cheesy pop song in it, and a lot of like a Christopher Lee lookalike with it's obviously dubbed. Like that that kind of thing it's entertaining to watch, but I can't say that it's actually a good film. If that makes sense.
Entertaining, hard to say it's good. Julia, I can't wait. This is not even your first time watching this movie, because
it's funny because I actually recognized I didn't recognize the film right at the beginning. I recognized the film as soon as all the women like just ran up, giggling up the stairs, and I was like, oh yes, we've seen this movie at the finishing school in their little nightgowns, their little silk nighties, like they're from Paradise Island from Wonder Woman. But anyway, this film, basically you just take my comments from last week and just copy them and insert them in here because it's exactly the same thing. It's all about, well, actually, you know what? I have to say this one is a little less sexist than the last one, even because the last one, like I said, it was like all these damsels in distress and these big strong men rescuing them. And this one at least has a few female characters who are a little stronger than the other one, and it has less strong male characters. I mean, it just really doesn't have very many strong male characters at all, actually. But there's still, there's so much gratuitous, just, like breasts, basically. I mean, they're just everywhere. And, that's like the only thing is, I just kept getting distracted. It's so funny how you can watch a vampire movie, and I'm distracted by the unrealistic nature of the gratuitous nudity rather than the unrealistic nature of the vampires themselves. But,
are you really saying this boarding school is unrealistic? Are you really shattering?
The finishing school. Tony, to be fair, I've actually never been to a finishing school, so it could be exactly like it's represented in the film. I don't know.
I feel like there's someone out there like the wrestling guy meme. It's real to me. It's real to me.
I love the notion that there's a finishing school out there where they send all the best and brightest, the daughters, the seemingly like 24-year-old daughters of rich people everywhere, and they do these weird Grecian urn calisthenics on out front, like they're
in 90s that are like about to fall off their shoulders and they reveal their braless breasts.
I know what it is. I think that these guys are training those women to be a kung fu army. They just don't know it yet. They're just that's what they're doing.
I think they're being trained to be like. They're being trained to be like those women in Manos, the Hounds of Fate, that can just wave their hands at you and you die.
That'd be awesome too. Or maybe Kung Fu Concubines of the Devil, which sounds like a really good exploitation movie. Now that I think about it, Kung Fu Concubines of the Devil.
Yes, what is it? Kung Fu Concubines of Satan, I think, does sound like an excellent movie. It would have been made by AIP in like 1975. You know who you would put these guys with? And Tony, and I want your first impression, but these women doing their calisthenics would really fit nicely with the Kung Fu army of the Mad Marduk in those Steve Case Kung Fu movies.
Oh, yeah,
what were
Kill
those
and
called?
Kill Again?
Yes, Kill and Kill Again.
Kill or Be Killed and Kill and Kill Again, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be, somehow those
proof positive that my education is complete, yes.
That would be really awesome.
Okay. Tony, the Mad Marduk, tell me your first impressions.
This movie has really cheesy stuff in it, like the intro of the guy who looks like kind of a low-rent Doctor Strange. or Dracula from Castlevania, believe it or not, except maybe slightly older. But he kind of reminds me.
He seems to me to be a Christopher Lee stand-in. Like
totally.
Yeah, but he's so much more cheesy, and it's kind of fun that way. I think it sounds like I like this movie more than anybody else. One thing this movie does have that a lot of the other ones don't is people actually trying to take care of business.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like, there's action. They're like, it's got a fairly competent, Satan, the forces of Satan, like, are actually trying to stop the forces of good. And there's people walking around besides people who aren't creepy teachers trying to get stuff done. And
I felt so bad that the same guy that was the butler in the Vampire Lovers is the cop in this, and he's probably the only competent male figure other than Dracula wannabe, and he gets killed. The same actor gets killed by the vampires.
Okay, save him because I want to. We'll get to him.
He's the new Agent Savaggio.
Yes.
Speaking of
what Tony is referring to. What Tony is referring to is in my sort of Dracula comics. There's a character called Agent Savaggio, named after Tony, who never dies but gets like injured in all kinds of horrible ways in every issue. So when there's a giant like blood monster porcupine thing, Agent Savaggio gets a bunch of spines in his face, and Agent Savaggio gets half eaten by a blood augmented shark. Various.
Which is a step up from the single character named Julia who did get killed very early on in the series.
Let me also say that Jason and I are best friends, and so sometimes I wonder if I should be worried if this is
friends
a
like that who
thing,
needs enemies,
or perhaps a catharsis, and I don't know about it. But either way, I get to rag Jason about it. But this poor guy, yes, you're right, Drew. He, oh man, he's eternally. His Sisyphean task is to eternally almost get the better of the devil in the form of vampires, and yet, wah.
Well, we're going to talk about what could have been done with that guy, because that's, I think, is one problem. All right. So, did you have any? Is that
no? I think I like it more. My first impression is I think I like it more than everyone else, but we'll see.
All right. And here's mine. I'll do this pretty fast so we can get into it. I really believe that I tell people all the time, you gotta watch Hammer movies. Hammer movies are where it's at. And I'm not completely certain that this would be. I'm of two minds. I kind of feel like no way should this be your first Hammer movie, because you would come away going, I don't understand. This is like a bloody Benny Hill thing. It's like Confessions of a Window Washer. With everybody's being basically. The setup is totally like one of those confessions movies from the 60s and 70s, where a novelist is wandering through the Hammerscape and comes across an old girls' school and thinks that they're hot, and so he takes a job as a teacher. That is a crazy concept, and it's a concept for a comedy and not really for a vampire movie, but that's the kind of movie this is. On the other hand, I kind of feel like it could be your first Hammer movie, because you had a lot of the stuff that really people, like we talked about last time, is the cliche of Hammer. You have the women and the chiffon and all the low-cut stuff and the crazy colors and the fact that it's just unapologetically takes place in the past. I mean, I keep going back to how weird it is that these movies just sort of take place in the past, in the Gothic, this weird Hammer world, as though it's just a TV series that takes place back then. So let's get into it. This is the second Carmilla movie, all right? So what is this movie? This movie is, in theory, number 2 in a 3-part Carmilla sequence by Hammer that they were doing in 70 and 71 and 72. Rapid fire. They did these movies. They must have taken like less than 6 months to make each of these movies, and maybe not that long. And Carmilla has been recast as, last time she was Ingrid Pitt, a sort of very regal-looking 30-something woman who very, very much seemed like a countess. And her shtick was that she would insinuate herself into the lives of noblewomen and often kind of fall in love with these ingenues and seduce them and ultimately kill them, whether she wanted to or not. Now, we open with Carmilla coming back, like a Doctor Who regeneration. And she comes back in the most awesome way I have seen in a while. Does anybody want to describe the reincarnation of Carmilla at the beginning of this movie? And I'll do it if Go ahead, Drew.
I guess I can do it. So she's all like, skeletal, but with.
She's a skeleton, yes.
Well, she's not exactly a skeleton. She's
mummy. She's like
skeletal.
a mummy.
Yeah, more like mummy. And then, so this poor young woman who is just, I got to back up to the poor young woman who's walking out by the road. And by the way, she doesn't have nearly enough clothing on her chest, in my opinion. I'm going to say that pretty much every time we see a woman. So she is walking toward this carriage that has stopped to kind of give her a ride, and she sees whoever's in the carriage and smiles and thinks, oh, whoever that is seems nice enough. Gets in the carriage and then looks horrified at whoever she's with, and then what does she do? Rather than hop back out of the carriage, she just lays back and screams. And I'm like, get out of the carriage! So then the carriage takes off, and whatever they did to the poor woman to knock her out, she's now unconscious and gets her throat slashed. Ooh! But we don't get to see the throat slashing thing. We just get to see the red Caro syrup pouring out of her into a bowl. And so then they pour the red Caro syrup all over the skeleton and cover it up. And then there's a really cool scene while they do the little ceremony that this Christopher Lee wannabe does the ceremony to bring Carmilla back to life, Mircalla, whatever. I guess it's Carmilla originally, and then she's Mircalla in this new iteration. And it's this really neat effect where it's like E.T., like, the chest is glowing, and everything, and as she becomes herself and then rises, but we don't see her face because I think that we're not supposed to know that Mircalla is Carmilla for half the film, but, like, how could you not know that? At some point there's, like, this revelation that it's really her, and you're just like, oh, we didn't know that this whole time? But anyway, so they don't show her right now.
I don't know. I think, that is interesting whether or not we're supposed to know. But yeah, they cover her with the sheet and then they pour the blood all over it. And the guy who we keep calling a Christopher Lee knockoff, but to be fair, this really tall guy with dark hair wearing an awesome vampire cape reads this incantation, which I don't remember at all, but it fits, and it is remarkably cheesy, but I kind of love how straight it is. There's no campiness to the way these vampires are.
Well, as a horror film, like, this is the best scene in the whole movie because this is legitimately good stuff. It's like they're doing this sort of inverted Catholic-esque ritual, and it's very spooky.
Well, he does
cool say. I do remember that he says "Venite Lucifer" at some point, which is kind of cool. So it's like a devil worshipping ceremony.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's cool about it is also they bring back the kind of like vampires are demons kind of thing.
Yes.
Well, that's the thing I
lot.
always like about the Hammer films. The way they portrayed vampires was always very heavily on the Satanism, and I know that seems like a strange thing to enjoy, but it makes them, even when they are sympathetic, which the Carmilla character, I guess they were trying to attempt to do that in this. They're still bad, they're still bad. So
there's no problem with. They have to kidnap a girl and slash her throat to do this, and that's what they're going to do. Yes, they're. This is, I think, really is the best part of it. You could take this whole thing as a wonderful vignette about bringing a vampire back to life.
And you did say that is Christopher Lee's eyes, and they showed the close up of the eyes. That they're actually the bloodshot eyes are actually Christopher Lee's eyes.
Yes, for some reason
funny,
they keep cutting away.
I said that while we were watching the movie, and Jamie and I had a laugh about that. Like, it looks like they just intercutted Christopher Lee's eyes on that, and I was right.
You're right. And it seems crazy. I mean, like normally people go to let's do stock footage of the moon or stock footage of the Apollo missions. This is where do we go? Oh, it was stock footage of Christopher Lee's bloodshot eyes because somehow we can't do without that. That guy has fine eyes. There's nothing wrong with his eyes. He could have cut to them.
Maybe he didn't want to wear the contacts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. Yeah, poor Christopher Lee. One thing you have to admire is that he would wear, as Dracula, he had these contact lenses that are not like the things that you put in or even that your mom would put in that were kind of like stiff and glass. These were these big I don't know if they were plastic or glass, but they were big things that would go inside your eye and rest on your eyeball. Terrible, horrible, painful things for Dracula to be wearing. I can't envision that he could have worn them for more than, I don't know, surely just a few minutes at a time, because they're awful, but maybe that's why Dracula's so irritable all the time, is he's got this freaking thing. He'd also be blind as a bat. So Carmilla has now risen, and they show her back. There's no way we're confused about who she is. We also know that in theory, we saw the last movie. So we have two things going on at once. Carmilla, last time she was going to people's houses. This time she gets dropped off by her mother. There's a family of 3 vampires. She gets dropped off by the Countess, her mother, at a finishing school for girls.
I think it's her aunt. I don't think it's her mother.
Then it is an aunt. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Whatever she is, she's the Countess. And they, the same thing. We're going off on some sort of special business. And so we're dropping Carmilla off at this finishing school for girls, which is literally like, apparently it is just across the golf course from the ruins of the Karnstein castle where Carmilla was raised. And where Carmilla was brought back from the dead. So meanwhile, this guy, Richard Lestrange, or Lestrange, whatever he's called, is a novelist. He's like me. So this guy is like me, only a lot richer, because he's heir to becoming the lord of something or other. So he is wandering, doing research on vampires. He's writing a vampire book, and he doesn't believe in any of that stuff. And he comes across, how the heck does he wind up at the girls' school? Anyway, he gets to the girls' school, and they introduce him around because he's a famous author. And the only reason they let him hang out is because he's also, heir to a title. And he meets Carmilla. He meets
you have to mention that the headmistress says, well, since you're the son of a lord, I'm going to let you come on, but I want you to know that I do not like your novels, and I do not approve them.
Your novels would not be appropriate for the girls, and whenever the headmistress introduces him to other people, she says, well, he's heir to a title. So, and the headmistress is a wonderful comic character. That's all she is. She's here to basically be fussy and prim and ineffectual. And Richard Lestrange meets 2 women, both hot, but in different ways. One is Susanna Lee as the very proper, I don't know, she's the sort of the den mother of the girls. She teaches, several classes and also instructs them in their strange Grecian calisthenics. And also the lovely, I think she's called Mircalla, which is our blonde Ute Stensgaard. And he's instantly smitten with Mircalla. And so he's like, well, clearly I need to be a teacher at this school so I can get close to this student. Okay. That's not how life works, right? I'm not aware of anybody who goes to, say, University of Texas and says, look at these students. I have to be a professor here. That's not, to my knowledge.
Well,
somebody write to me?
All due respect to UT, my alma mater, those girls were just like 100% hot girls at this finishing school, whereas UT is like there's 48,000 students, only a small percentage of which are hot girls. No, maybe not a small percentage, but certainly not 100%.
And luckily, I have to point out that luckily I married one of them, and so yes.
But I want to say that he doesn't get the job right away. He has to send away the gay professor who actually has the job of teaching at the school. He manages to send that guy away.
This is why I'm saying he's creepy. He sets up the legitimate literature professor. He sends him away.
But not as creepy as the other professor.
No, he's not as creepy as the other professor, but he's still creepy. He's basically stalking a student.
Okay, so so now we've got 2 things. We've got a finishing school handpicked for hotness.
Yes.
Who also only hires creeps.
Right.
Which,
hey, and women and creepy men.
This might happen in super rich environments
Also at the school, you had the guy who was going to come to the school, who was going to take the new teaching job, and he was a totally effeminate man, possibly chosen for that reason to come to the all-girls school. But Lestrange, who's rich, says, hey, I could use some research in Vienna, so here's some money, get out of here, and he goes and takes the job. And then there's Ralph Bates, who Drew mentioned before, and Ralph Bates plays this guy who teaches, I don't remember what, but art history maybe.
He teaches genealogy and history.
Genealogy and history.
Giles Barton is his name.
Yes, Giles Barton. And Giles Barton is a greasy-haired, big spectacled, kind of hunched-looking man who pretends to be uninterested in the girls.
He looks like the Owl. You remember the Spider-Man villain, the Owl? He looks almost exactly like that character.
Yes.
I always throughout the night, I referred to him as Proto-Snape. Not as suave, not as refined, much more creepy, but yes, he's like Snape's cousin that they don't really mention a lot. Oh yeah, he went to that finishing school and
he's what you would get if.
But we don't really talk about him. He was kind of an embarrassment at every, reunion.
And then he's a perv. He is a perv. The girls know it. He is sneaking around in the woods and staring at them. He is what you would get if you merged Snape with Grima Wormtongue. He is just this
he's Proto-Snape.
So, Proto-Snape. I love it. And, so that's our cast. Oh, yes, and all the beautiful girls. So the moment Carmilla gets there, remember, her last thing was that Carmilla was, an occasionally bisexual, but generally lesbian vampire who wanted to be with girls, and that's where we start. Carmilla goes smorgasbord, and so she starts hitting on, and killing the girls in her dormitory, and kills one almost right away. And meanwhile, Mr. Lestrange.
First they have a very romantic or a very sensual little relationship where they skinny dip and give each other topless massages.
Well, and there was actually something sort of cool there. The thing where
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was very cool.
Yeah.
Where what I'm thinking of is the one where Miss Playfair, the unfortunately named Miss Playfair, Janet Playfair, the teacher, is like locking up for the night and walking up and down the halls, doing stupid announcements. And she walks into the room where one girl is like kissing Carmilla's neck, and she like in a move that will be instantly familiar to anybody who was ever young, like the girl who's kissing Carmilla's neck like jumps across the room really fast, indicating nothing was going on here. And
the worst indicator for anyone who's ever been an RA, right? Why would you jump that way? Nothing. There was a mouse.
And nobody has ever been able to act casual in life. Janet Playfair just sort of goes and she leaves, which I also think is quite realistic. But I want to say about Janet Playfair, the character, I love this actress. I think Susanna Lee, is it Lee or Leighton? Anyway, this woman could read the phone book and I would listen to her reading. She has this just delightful accent. She is wonderful. And it's Susanna Lee, and she, I'm not crazy about the way that, she kind of gets wasted as the story goes on. But, she's fantastic.
But, one thing that did strike me that I kind of liked is, as opposed to some of the other movies, in this movie, Carmilla Mircalla is actually truly seductive. Like, she plays all the mind games. She's actually the seductive kind of evil, not just in the very exploitative way that the movie makes it out, but like she has mind control powers. Anybody who's around her wants to be around her more.
Right. That's absolutely right.
It's usually kind of handled in more like just less obvious ways or in more kind of casual. But this person is actually, that's her superpower. And the fact that they kind of use that and make that, she's going to keep doing that until there's no one else around, and then you assume she's going to move on and ruin somewhere else.
I agree.
That's actually really cool. And also she, there's even a scene later on where she's actually sucking the blood of this girl, and the girl's actually like, she's into it, like a lot.
She's really into it, and that's a great scene.
That doesn't happen all the time. Like you truly get the supernatural part because of that, and they go for it. I mean, even though the movie is what it is, I think that's a cool, like, the stuff they're trying to bring back, even if it sometimes tends to be a little cheesy, is kind of cooler than other movies where they kind of play it more coy or don't make the villain go for it. And I thought that was actually kind of neat, because you don't see that very often anymore, or only in certain movies where the vampires actually, like, they don't just cut away and scream or whatever. The girl's like, the girl in that one scene, she's actually like, patting her hair, like, hey, come on, suck more blood, which is what a vampire would, if you have all the power, that's what would happen, right? Like, the victim,
would be hypnotized, would be into it, and erotically into it.
That kind of was a cool choice. So.
Well, and what I really loved about that scene, though, was Richard Lestrange at that point is pathetically obsessed with Carmilla and is jealously banging on the door. So all of a sudden it's like Swan in Love. It's this picture of
people fall in love very easily in this movie. I mean, the headmistress, whatever her name is, sort of randomly falls in love with the teacher, or randomly falls in love with Lestrange.
Yeah, Miss Playfair says that the only reason she's going to help Lestrange is because she loves him. I thought that was out of nowhere. I just sort of took it for granted that you give it a mulligan, okay, she's in love with him, because people fall in love with whoever they. I guess since there are only two men in her life, I guess she can't go to the village. None of those people are appropriate. So there's only two men in her life. One is Ralph Pates, and we've already discussed what he's like. So this sort of slightly randy, but at least smart, Richard Lestrange is better. So she's in love with Lestrange. And she gets it in her head that something weird is going on. The people dying are involved with Carmilla, and we've got a love triangle. That's really cool. At least this movie turns into a love triangle between, Richard Lestrange, who's in love with Carmilla, trying to protect her, growing concern that she's a vampire, and meanwhile, Playfair, who's in love with Lestrange and knows that Carmilla is bad. Now, the place where the movie kind of goes weird, or not weird, I just kind of, is the dad of the way the movie resolves is that the dad of the girl that Carmilla killed, the first one that Carmilla killed, her dad is an American rich guy, investor, whatever he is. And he comes around because he's suspicious about his daughter's death, and he wants to see the body, and he wants to see the doctor, and all of that was handled hush-hush by the vampires, who are pretty slick.
They're passing off Count Chocula as a doctor.
As a doctor. And he mysterious death, he calls it a heart attack, because he has a fantastic That's why they cast that guy. His name is Mike Raven, and he's a DJ in London, and I'm sure he was a killer DJ. But so dad of the dead girl comes around, and he starts investigating, and very soon he gathers a small army to go kill the vampires. He's all business. But as you pointed out, we already had a really great character come along earlier, which was we've got Lestrange, but Lestrange isn't going to be out to kill them because he's going to protect Carmilla. And we had the detective, the police detective, who was investigating these various deaths, and he was all tough and very smart, and he was and brave as all heck, because he decides he's going to rappel down this really deep well to see if there's a body down there. Drew, you were saying did we talk about this already?
That's the butler. That's the butler. It's the same actor that played the butler, the proactive butler in the Vampire Lovers, and he has basically, the same thing. He's the only person at this point in the film that is actively trying to do something, and that's why it's doubly frustrating. If it just had been some random schlub playing this character, I might not have been so heartsick. But the fact that it's the same actor basically have the same thing happen to his character twice. I was really rooting for him again.
Well, and I think it's a flaw, honestly, because he's a good character, he's a good actor, and you like him, and he also represents sort of the intelligent middle class. You know, he's going to get down to business, and these crazy rich people are idiots with, you know, trying to decide they can bury bodies without going to the authorities and whatever. And
well, they're all trying. It's all trying to avoid scandal, which is one of the things that I did actually like about it. It's like, oh, we can't have any scandal. And they're just letting all these bodies pile up around them, and just to avoid scandal.
I love it, and I think that's so realistic. So that guy, then all of a sudden he's set up as the hero of the movie, and then he dies right away in the well. And then for some reason the movie decides we need a hero to wind up the film, as far as, or you know, anyway, somebody to push along the third act and get the hunt for the vampires going, and they've already killed the cop, so now they've got the dad. Now I got to say, structurally, there's no reason for both of those characters to be there. This should be one or the other. You know, I think, you know, imagine Liam Neeson is the American dad. He's come in and he's investigating because he's a cop, and then he nearly gets killed in the well, and then he starts the war at the end. One character that would have been fine, but instead we introduced the American dad after they kill the cop. I just kind of feel like it's making us waste all this time getting to know characters and then dismissing them.
Well, I think that's my problem with this movie is that it doesn't really give you anybody clear cut to root for. I mean, you know, even the vampire characters, you know, are by and large cardboard cutouts of vampire characters from other Hammer movies. So,
yes,
like, and the so-called heroes, either have Richard Lestrange, who we've gone into that at length, and then we have people who keep showing up and dying.
Yes.
Yeah, I still do like the fact that, like, I guess unlike a lot of other supporting characters, like in this movie, finally you get the dad who's like, wait a second, what the hell are you guys talking about? No, I'm not going to just go away. I paid money, and my daughter was here. Now she has a heart attack. Like, no, I'm not just going to, poor me and go away. Did you actually think that was going to work? And he actually tries to, like, get stuff done.
Well, and also the teacher, Jenny Playfair, who goes and actually reports the fact that this girl's been missing.
Yeah.
You know, because the headmistress is just all concerned for the reputation of the school, but you know these other people. So they're definitely a few. Like I like how you put it that is people are getting stuff done because there's more than just the one. But I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Well, see, I mean, you see a lot of like kind of this era of vampire movies where they went kind of with a more loose, kind of lurid way of storytelling, and there's not a lot of action in many of those. And I thought it was kind of refreshing, you know, despite its flaws, that you did have characters who are, you know, trying to take charge.
Well, and even the guy, even the guy
who ends up being a hero.
Even Giles Barton is getting stuff done. It's just that he's getting stuff done on his route toward becoming a vampire himself, because he really wants to. He doesn't say he wants to become a vampire. He says he wants to be a servant. But he actually gets rid of the girl's body that Macaulay kills, and
I love his scene where he shows up with the cross, and you're like, oh yeah, and then he inverts it and goes, no, you take me. Like that is cool, and would, you know, that was neat and interesting. There's so many
Ralph Bates, I think, is kind of an underrated figure in the Hammer canon. Like, you know, he doesn't get quite as much love as Christopher. You know, because he came along kind of at the decline of Hammer, and
absolutely.
He always makes for an entertaining performance, in my opinion.
Yeah, but
it was really excellent in Horror of Dracula. Horror of Frankenstein, where Ralph Bates played young Frankenstein, and that was a really good performance. You know, he is a very reliable actor, and they were bringing him in to be their leading man for these movies if they were to keep on going, because they were thinking, you know, do we recast him as Frankenstein? Do we recast Dracula with Ralph Bates? You know, he could have had his pick, and then, you know, shortly thereafter, really the studio just kind of falls apart. Okay, there's one thing that we definitely need to talk to before we talk about anything else. Now, here's how I introduced it. He said, if there's any, I said this in a review, just like 2 sentences, and it gets us to, I think, the key moment of the entire movie, other than the end. If there's any reason to see lust for a vampire, it's not the Stensgaard skinny dipping or the lesbian kissing or the extreme nipular content of the film. The reason to see lust for a vampire is Strange Love, a slow pop song, not unlike To Serve with Love, that plays over Lestrange's and Mercala's moonlight love scene. The worldly 1970 song jars the movie with such absurdity that the viewer is left utterly thrilled that he saw such a travesty. Okay, am I
Every
on?
time I heard that song, I started singing that Pink Floyd song
Pink
from
Floyd?
The Wall, Crazy. Where it's like, crazy. You remember that song?
Yes.
That song is seriously, like, that song momentarily pushes this movie from, into Mystery Science Theater 3000 territory. I mean, it's such a bizarre choice. And, I was listening to the commentary. Jimmy Sangster, the guy that directed this and who is one of the main architects of Hammer Horror, was actually, they put that into the film against the producers did, against he didn't want it in there, and when it played at the premiere, he went to he took an overlong bathroom break, basically.
Oh. Wow, that's really a shame, because it is out of left field. I mean, to some extent, it's so out of left field, you can almost ignore that it's there, but it's crazy that it's there, with all the apologies to Pink Floyd. Yes, that's pretty amazing. By the way, when did that song from Pink Floyd come out? Apparently that's from The Trial, so...
It's from The Wall. No, that song's from The Wall. It's, well, The Trial, right. Yeah, it's, I don't know what that, let's see, what year is that?
Oh, that's okay. Anyway.
I don't know, but it's like, it's because the tune is just very similar. Crazy.
It's during the love scene. So basically, if you imagine that, if this film makes any sense at all, Carmilla is a vampire who prefers women, but she has found herself falling in love with Richard Lestrange, who, for whatever reason, is worth falling in love with, and he's in love with her, and they have this...
As I told you when we were watching the movie, there are only 2 guys in the whole school, and one of them is total loser who wants to be the servant of the vampire. So you probably fell in love with that guy first.
But Carmilla doesn't fall in love with men. I mean, this is odd.
No, I'm talking about. Oh, you mean Carmilla falls in love? I thought you meant the Jenny Playfair.
Carmilla has a love scene with Lestrange, and so and this song plays. Well,
let me tell you my theory about that, because there's 2 things.
Okay.
Well, and then I'll say something else. Did you notice that she says, like, he's like, if you want to prove to me that you're not a vampire, then, like, sleep with me, basically. And it's just like, that just seemed like so, such a metaphor for how, people, like, men lure women into bed. It's like, if you want to prove that you're not a prude, then just sleep with me. Or if you want to prove whatever, if you prove that you love me, then sleep with me. And I was thinking that it was just so classic. But also, I was thinking that the rest of the movie, because remember how they said that the Karnstein vampires will prey on virgins, and I was thinking, can you imagine all the guys who are using that in town to go, hey baby, you don't want to be a virgin when the Karnsteins come back, and using that like Grease 2 style to try to get some action.
All the greasy but yet cunning guys are using that line. That's for sure. I can sell you really anti-vampire insurance. Just get in my van.
I'm really pleased that you would go for a Grease 2 reference, actually, there. So that happens, and that sort of does strange things to the movie, but then it's okay. It's time for the dad to come, and he's sniffing around town. He finds out the Karnsteins inhabit the ruined church, and he gets an army together to go to the ruined church. And so Lestrange sees the mob coming, and it's a classic torches and peasants mob coming to the castle. And priests. And he runs to the castle, and he pleads with Carmilla and her vampire family to, get out, to run. And Carmilla, says, no, run, save yourself. And the Count sort of puts the whammy on her and makes her try to attack Lestrange. But here's something funny. I love the vampires' actual strategy. When they recognize that the mob intends to set the castle on fire, they go, all we got to do is wait it out, because in this universe, all of a sudden, with some rules we've been given, there is no death for us in fire. I never knew that, but okay. And
so, since there's no death for us in fire, we're just going to stand here and let the fire burn around us.
Yes. That
I know, but it makes them, they look so badass. Like, that's one of the few times that guy with his weirdo hair looks like a badass.
Yeah, that's true.
And I really want to sample his line about
there is no death for us in fire.
Yeah, it just sounds so it sounds so awesome. Like, oh man, that is a freaking great sample. I need to,
it really,
Rob
really
Zombie,
would be
I haven't
great
heard Rob Zombie use that. I need to find a place to use that, because it's that line, like, just rocks, and his delivery. That's one of those you're just like, okay, I'll forgive a lot of things because that was awesome. But yeah, I think that's cool. Where he's like, all right, yeah, set us on fire. It's awesome too. Again, the villagers finally, yet again, are the other people who decide, screw this. Vampires, there's rich people running around. Some of them are vampires. It's time to let's get rid of this. We're not going to have this anymore. And
they just get themselves
they did it in Frankenstein, but very rarely do you see it in vampire movies.
The bishop or whatever, the bishop's like, hey, you can't burn them down. You have to stake them or cut their heads off. And then at the end, he's like, oh well, thanks God for freeing us of the evil. And I'm like, wait a minute.
No, but I think that's one of the cool things that's sort of kind of like subversive about the ending, is the fact that he's, he hasn't really gotten rid of them, but it's
but he knows
like evil's laughing
sorry.
in the castle, and I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, the bishop is celebrating, or as I put it, mission accomplished. I mean, there's nothing anywhere. So, and that's the end, and we're left at the end of Chapter 2 of the Karnstein cycle. And by the way, Chapter 3 is even going to go back in time. So chronologically, this is the last Hammer episode of the. It's the last one in time.
Also, remember, Carmilla gets an unfortunate, oddly placed stake to the heart in the form of a gigantic flaming beam.
Yes,
falling from the, rafter.
Yeah, so waiting out the fire doesn't work out for her. We can hope that the other vampires are standing under a stone arch, but Carmilla is attacking Richard Lestrange because she's been hypnotized by the Count to get rid of this guy.
Oh, and that's awesome too, because he lets her kind of go. Again, they go back to the kind of the vampires still have superpowers.
Yes,
which is always good to see, kind of brought back. They're not just angsty, lovelorn, whatever, supernatural beings. Like, this guy actually, he sits in the background for a while, and he's like, you know what, it's time for me, King Vampire, to actually, again, I'm going to do something. And he says, all right, enough. Can't let you guys mess it up. And he starts, taking control of her and showing that he has power, even though he kind of sits in the background for most of the time. And that's actually kind of cool, too.
It is really cool when you think of, how he just sort of, presumably he doesn't need to feed very much himself, because throughout the entire movie, he's just sort of watching with amusement the whole situation.
Well, is he supposed to be the same character as the Man in Black from the first movie?
Right.
I can only imagine that he is. It would have to be the case that he's the same guy as the Man in Black.
Except he's less creepy. He's less creepy in the way that guy was, and it's weird because he alternates between being really cheesy, where you kind of want to laugh, and then in parts he's like a true badass.
Yes.
And oh man, why couldn't they give him less funky hairdo and more badassness?
Well, that was a wig, man. Like, I don't even think that's his real hair.
No, that's what I'm saying. Why that wig, and why that look?
Speaking of wigs, I have to ask, why does Lestrange wear a wig? Well, I mean, our main guy is wearing this really sort of cheesy New Romantics wig.
It's supposed to be fitting into the period, and I'm sure their real hair was not.
Yeah, I mean that's what I definitely saw. But
I can only imagine.
He could have worn. There's a lot of different villain hairdos that you could have come up with that wouldn't have looked like that.
His Widow's Peak is a little cheesy, but I like that he is like truly a classic vampire. I mean, he's like literally a Halloween mask vampire. You know, from the Widow's Peak to the Red Cave.
Well,
I
wonder if whoever was working on prototypical Castlevania, that wasn't at least one of the touchstones.
Absolutely.
He really like. There's been others, but this guy really has a lot of the stuff that eventually makes it into a Castlevania vampire.
He has the posing down. He has the weird hypnosis fingers like Lugosi does when he puts the whammy on her. No, I really, and you mentioned the Hammer's use of superpowers among vampires, and Scars of Dracula comes out about exactly the same time as this movie, and it may even be in a lot of these same sets. And in that one, they have Dracula able to fend off attacks in his sleep, like subconsciously, which is really cool. So they were experimenting a lot with different ways that vampires could use their badass powers. Although, it seems like it's thrown in. You don't, there are always structural problems with these scripts where you're just waiting for one of them to be so perfectly structured that we can, take time for these powers to like build and for the characters to be kind of amazed by them or comment on them and so forth. But yeah, no, absolutely. So we should wrap up, and I'd love to get final thoughts about Lust for a Vampire, and also any endorsements from you guys. And we can go in a different order. Julia, do you have final thoughts, and is there anything that you would like to endorse this week?
Well, my final thoughts are the same as my original thoughts, which are that, Hammer comes through once again with this total, red-blooded male perspective.
It's real to me. It's real to me.
Yeah. So it's not going to disappoint if that's what you if that's the angle that you're coming from. But it's like it has moments for sure. I have not yet seen it, but there is a new show on tonight. There was a new show on tonight, and I've forgotten the name of it. Let's see what it's called. But it's where the power has all gone out of the world, and so there's no more electricity. That I'm super excited about. It's called Revolution. That's the name. And so I'm going to watch the first episode to see how it is. But it seems like a great concept for a show where we've all the power's gone, like all the electrical, the phones, everything, and what happens then. So I'm intrigued. So that's my I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really endorse it, but I'm going to watch it.
All right. Very cool. Drew, do you have any final thoughts and endorsements if you have any?
I would say that if you have an interest in vampire movies, particularly quote-unquote classic vampire movies, then this would be a good movie for you to watch. But if you're only like passingly interested in vampire movies and horror movies, this is not going to be your cup of tea. It's definitely this is a deep level of nerdery talking about this movie, and I my wife and I hadn't seen this movie probably since high school. I watched it with my wife. We both got a laugh out of it, but we're both kind of nerdy, so
yes,
that's the type of person you kind of have to be to enjoy this. As far as endorsements go, I feel Strange kind of kind of strange endorsing this since it was such a big hit, but the same night we watched this last week, we also watched the Hunger Games movie because Jamie wanted to see it, and I was very impressed. I thought from the trailers that this was going to be kind of juvenile and honestly a bit more like the Twilight movies, and instead what I got was a very, very smart, very, very well-acted and well-shot dystopian sci-fi movie that happens to be about teenagers. And if you're looking for, you know, a grim sci-fi movie to watch, I would say that this would be a good thing for you to check out. And don't let the fact that it was geared towards teenagers turn you off, because it's actually very, very intelligently done.
Outstanding.
That's cool to hear.
By the way,
all my friends were like, "Oh, look, Battle Royale light."
You know, here's the thing I said, because I had a friend when I recommended it. My friend Ivan kind of had the same reaction when I told him how much I enjoyed it. And I said, you know, technically all zombie films are Night of the Living Dead light. But that doesn't mean there aren't good zombie films. Battle Royale is great. This is great, too. Well, you can enjoy both.
It's like the people who complain, like, oh, this band is like this. And you're like, well, that other band isn't around, and B, you know, there's always room. I think we talked about it before. Hey, what about a remake of this? My idea is there's always room for a good version of something. Like, nobody's going to complain if it's good, right?
And the oceans always swallow the bad remakes. They do. Nobody remembers something that gets remade and it was bad. And if there's a new version of something and nobody likes it, it disappears forever and it's never heard from again. I'm never afraid of that. But I got to say, Drew, I Hunger Games, and I haven't watched it. I can't bring myself to watch it. I'm not a big. It just seems too painful. I have no doubt. I didn't expect that it would be juvenile.
It's bleak. Everything. It is bleak.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, a lot of people talk about how the Nolan Batman movies are bleak. This is bleak. This is a mainstream movie that is thumbing their nose pretty blatantly at reality TV, the class divide. I mean, they're talking a lot about stuff that's going on right now through this crazy science fiction story, and that's good sci-fi right there. That's what good sci-fi is supposed to do. But yes, if it's not a gory movie, oddly enough, but it is. The tone is very, very grim.
Well, cool. I'll check that out. It's I trust your opinion.
Your final thoughts and endorsements?
Oh, me?
Or did we get? Yeah, we did Julia. We did Drew. Did we do Tony?
No.
No.
My final thoughts. I actually had a few things I didn't even talk about. A couple of things. I liked how the vampires kind of had that weird shrivel up thing they did when they got staked.
How they mummify, right?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting, and also it kind of leads back to the fact that since they weren't cutting their heads off, which is what you have to stake them and then cut their heads off, and then I guess hopefully burn those bodies because they've been staked. Maybe that would work with these. I don't know, since they say they can't be hurt with fire, but I don't know. But that was kind of cool. Also, really cool scene where Merkala is like going away, and they have this like backlit like effect where she's lit up. I think it's after, if I remember correctly, after she and the teacher get together. And that was really cool, like really atmospheric. And I totally forgot to talk about that.
There is a lot of really great atmosphere here. There is, and I even like the sets.
And also, my only other kind of comedy bit was that when they're talking and the guy goes after Proto Snape's books and he's looking at them, and each one is like witchcraft, double devil, and all this stuff. And I just expected the Mystery Science Theater in me wanting to pick up a book and, here's a book on extreme literalism. Because everyone is more just like, and here's what else he was studying. Almost Scooby-Doo. Like, and here's one on just being literal. interesting. Because it's just a stack of books, and like all of them are very specific. Like there's no way you could teach those in any class that he was teaching.
Okay.
But that that's his whole, all of his books on his shelf, each one slightly more telling than the last. And
that's actually how Jason's bookshelf is.
Nice. Having seen his bookshelf, that's really cool. That's pretty good. But also, Jason's not a teacher who's teaching like physics. Like Jason's a writer who writes a lot about vampires, so it makes sense. But if you're a teacher, a general studies teacher at a finishing school, you don't expect 50 books on various occult practices. Or maybe you do if you're at the right.
Unless you're Giles at the Buffy school.
That's true. Like I said, unless
this was a Giles too.
That is true.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, there you go.
He was just
playing
for the other team.
After this guy.
And all
he was playing for the other team.
It all comes around. That see, now it makes sense. As far as my endorsements go, one thing, and this is a kind of divisive movie, but just on Netflix comes one of my favorite, just truly, I love absurdity. And so my love of absurdity says, see the FP on Netflix. It looks dystopian, but having lived in a rural area, I almost believe that this could be happening somewhere where really bad stuff goes down and people settle their differences with a version of Dance Dance Revolution. And it's very low budget and maybe more crass than some people feel comfortable with, but has some great lines. It's truly, the people who get it are going to really enjoy it. And the people who don't are going to be like, why did I waste my time with this movie?
And what is it called
again? The FP. And it just came out on Netflix. So I saw it.
Didn't the Alamo Draft House have a hand in getting this movie distributed? Yeah.
It was distributed through Draft House Films. In fact, they have a whole, you can win a, not win, but you buy the Blu-ray. There were different levels that you could buy, and they had all kinds of awesome stuff, and they still may be available. But it was one of the first Draft House Films releases, and I can kind of see why Tim, like, most of the time I agree with Tim on what's fun and awesome. And so when he said, "Hey, we're gonna distribute this," I'm like, "Oh yeah, okay." And then when I finally got to see it, like my brother and I just had a blast because it's just got some just really just craziness. And even better was one night on at Weird Wednesdays. There's a motorcycle gang movie about a bunch of black motorcycle gang encountering racism all over the country as they ride after, I want to say, Vietnam.
I remember that movie.
And they actually, I was like, wow, this looks familiar. They spend some time, actually, the FP is Fraser Park, and they actually spend not a big section of the movie, but a time when I'm like, hey, they're in the FP. So that was kind of funny. But yeah, it's on Netflix, so there's no reason, even if you watch a few minutes to turn it off. It's got all like classic like montage sequences, and it's just a really random, crazy movie where the rednecks in it are kind of like the white trash people who are in it are. You're like, I don't know if this is dystopian. This could be just in a really faraway place that I may or may not have lived in. So,
was that Darktown Strutters that you're thinking of?
No, it's called the Black Six, if I'm not mistaken.
Black Six.
Which is awesome because they got, like, football guys to...
yeah.
Awesome.
Joe Green, yes. Okay, I'm looking it up.
It's Joe Green, is it? Like...
Yes, it is. It says Joe Green was...
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and they also got, like, an endorsement for the motorcycles, but they were kind of, like, not quite big enough, the ones they got. So some of these guys like hulk over their motorcycles.
What I like that's the one where they repaint the lady's barn because she lets them stay in the barn, and they repaint it.
It's so good. It's so good.
And then the cracker sheriff or whoever comes around and says, those kind of people can't be trusted, and she's like, those kind of people repainted my barn, and it's like, that's right.
Also,
the Black Six are bringing racial harmony to the South.
Well, yeah, and there's also something, you get the impression something may or may not have happened in the night. in that scene, it's just all yeah. But anyway, random trivia. Black Six has a tie to the FP, a maybe dystopian movie about where gangs settle their differences with Beat Revelation, I think it's called. I have to look it up again, but it's basically Dance Dance Revolution. It's a callback to all the cheese of the 80s. But
what was the movie about the? I'm sorry to ask this. What was the movie with the female black biker gang, where there was like an underground lair, and there were people in behind bars that had been thrown down there, and there was like an evil Colonel Sanders who was out to take over the world.
Man, I don't know. I know what
very
you're talking
good.
about, and I can't remember it right offhand. But yes, that movie also is awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, I
okay,
feel bad.
but we're
like
far afield. I apologize. No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Anyway, so great. Okay, excellent. My final thoughts are: only see this movie if you like the idea of a gothic horror movie where the vampires aren't just vampires, but like are straight up classic, like archetypal vampires with black capes and red hoods and lots of bosomy women and weird music and a kind of really straight and sometimes pop sensibility. This is definitely a movie like that. It's hard to imagine. It's just such late hammer. It's so specific that it's hard to imagine watching this without being the kind of geek, like Drew was saying, that would wind up watching it in the first place. So I cannot imagine if a whole bunch of people said, I can't get into vampire movies. There's no way in hell I would show this movie to them. That would not be the one. Bride of Dracula, Kiss of a Vampire, those would be, Let Me In. Those are movies that I would recommend. Let the Right One In. So, but, if you're a Hammer fan or if you're kind of a cheesy horror fan, this offers a lot. Endorsements, boy, I got Flesh and Blood Book 2. And Flesh and Blood is a graphic novel from Monsterverse that is written by Robert Tennell and drawn by Neil Vogts. And it takes place in a universe that is drawn and written to somehow fit more or less into the Hammerscape, where you have Baron Frankenstein that looks like Peter Cushing, and you have Van Helsing, who's much younger and doesn't look like Peter Cushing because he's much younger, and he would have to be because he's hanging out with Baron Frankenstein, who predates Dracula by a long time, and Dracula's there, and it's got Carmilla, and it's got elements of H.G. Wells, and it's, in a sense, it's kind of like a horror League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and it is fantastic, and I really love it. The second graphic novel is out, and you totally got to look for it. I reviewed it on my blog, so definitely check that out. And that's it. We will be back next week with Twins of Evil, which is the third and last of the third of the Karnstein cycle and the last of the Sexy Vampire Retrospective, unless we absolutely must continue this retrospective because we find more sexy vampires. So we have not yet figured out what the next retrospective is. we don't know yet.
I will be out for that one because I will be at Fantastic Fest. But
okay.
I should be able to bring you many horror recommendations from Fantastic Fest. Cause they're
outstanding.
Including I guess, I don't know if it's the Austin premiere or not. I haven't seen anything else. Our old friend Cargill, who we've known from the Draft House, who goes also by Massa Worm on, he's finally got his movie Sinister out.
No
We've known this guy for a really long time, and so it's really cool to see the good guys winning. So I'll be able to report on that, and because I'm excited to see his movie. That's fantastic. So
I am too. That sounds fantastic.
So shout out to Cargill for getting a movie out, which is by no means easy.
Excellent.
From a writing standpoint, he's also got, I think, one or two novels. One is out, and I think the next one's coming out, and I'll have to look those up again. But
he's a great guy. I've talked to him a lot, actually. Yeah. And I remember actually, the last conversation I had with him, I accidentally revealed the end of a movie I hadn't seen, and I felt terrible. Isn't it funny how you think of people you've talked to before, and you instantly think of like how you hurt them?
Well, we also it's painful probably because we all share the love of movies, right? Like we all hung out at the Draft House where it was a collective, you know, and I think it's that Colorado Draft House especially, you know, the early, the diehards, and so knowing him all this time from just hanging out and then writing for Ain't It Cool, and then, you know, writing a movie and writing novels. That's cool. It's good when the good guys win, I think.
Absolutely. Well said.
So I'll be able to report on all of that, and but I unfortunately will miss next week's podcast. So I'm sure you guys have gotten awesome people to fill in for Drew, and so I'm sure it's in good hands.
We'll figure it out, and I think Drew's going to need to borrow your copy of Twins of Evil as well.
Yeah, I have not been able to hunt it down, and it's not on Netflix at all. Not streaming, not to have mail-in, which is strange to me that they have every other Carmilla movie but that one.
Amazon has the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray's out there. You know, and I'll look around, Drew, because I'll bet you I can find that movie streaming.
You're like the Sherlock Holmes of movie finding. You amaze me almost every week when we're doing an obscure movie. So.
Well, thank you, sir. That is very kind of you. It looks to me like somebody has illicitly posted the entire movie on YouTube, so I think you're in luck. Yeah. Unless it gets removed before this is over. So, yes, I'll send you a link. Anyway, thank you, guys, and we will see you next week for the final film in the Carmilla cycle. Have a fantastic week, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Good night.
Not at all.